Guess what day it is? It's Friday, and you know what that means? It's Feedback Friday. We are here to give you feedback on your artwork, and today we're going to teach you a composition technique you may have never heard of. It's called weight, right? Nobody ever talks about this one, but it's an important one to learn. I'm going to give you examples. We're going to review a lot of different paintings today and see if we can make them better. But you know what? Some of them are so good, it's going to really challenge me. I'm not sure if we're going to do it. Let's look at the paintings we're going to offer today and give critiques. So we have a beautiful watercolor. What else do we have? A still life, figure, a waterfall, and a farm scene or a schoolyard scene, and some asparagus. So that's cool. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to see if we can make them better. When you watch this, you'll start seeing your own problems by seeing it in other people's paintings when I point them out. Now, they're not all problems. Some of them are good things, but I encourage you to ask yourself when you're watching this, what do I need to change, right? A critical part of learning to paint is getting feedback because we cannot see our own mistakes. And even when I critique your painting, it's hard for you to hear it because you're like, I don't want to hear it, because we have our defense mechanisms. So here we go. Let's get the show officially started.
It's Art School Live with Eric Rose.
Welcome to Art School Live. We are here every weekday at 12 noon. Every weekday. On Mondays, you know what we do? Marketing Mondays. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we do art demos. And Fridays, we do feedback. That's why we're doing that today. As a publisher of art magazines and newsletters and frequent judge, I get to deal with a lot of artwork. Of course, I create my own as well. I can't see my own mistakes until somebody else points them out. It's really hard. Sometimes it helps to turn them upside down, play different games like that. But I might be able to see things in your paintings to help you make your paintings a little better. Today, we have some brave souls who have submitted paintings. So the rules, be kind, always be kind, be constructive. Don't tear into somebody because you don't know how fragile they are and you might destroy them and they may stop painting. We don't want that to happen. I could not paint. I couldn't draw a stick figure. I had no talent. I believed that you had to have natural talent. Boy, was I wrong. So don't do that to yourself. Watch yourself talk. You can do this. You can succeed. You just need great teachers to help you and great practice. And even the bad days are fun because you're painting and drawing, right? So here we go. Nothing personal. Remember, we're here to be helpful, right? Providing feedback is going to be important. I'd love for you guys to put into the comments what you see and what you would change, but be kind, be nice. Let's go to the paintings right now. What's our first painting? Okay, the first painting is this beautiful scene here. I'm going to bring it up. Oh, I brought the wrong one up. Man, brain dead. Okay. Which one is it? Okay, there it is. Okay, so this is a watercolor painting, and this is a black and white. Black and white and the watercolor are very, very similar because it's mostly a value painting, and that's really a good thing. So I'm going to point out a few things, but first off, what I'd like to do is congratulate the artist, Pam from California, for having the bravery to come on here, and we'll see what we can do. The first test I like to do is what I call the center test. I'll put a line dead center down the painting. Put that line dead center down the painting and dead center across there. And what I'm looking for is, did you place the horizon line here? Do you have something that's really pointing me to dead center? And we're a little bit close because the horizon line is right here, but you're not dead center, but it feels a little dead center. So what you might want to do is consider bringing the horizon line up, bringing the road in that way. That way you've got a little bit more foreground. Remember, a painting is either a foreground painting or a background painting in most cases. We're going to learn something different today about weight. It's going to defy all of that. So we've done the center test. Now let's do the tic-tac-toe board, which is based loosely on the golden mean. So you take 1/3 down, 1/3 down, 1/3 across, and then you look for are there focal point things in these intersections? And the answer is not really. This barn kind of comes close. If you were to move that horizon down or up, that might change that. And so you're wanting to have something happening in one of these primary areas. It doesn't matter which one. You can have things happening in 2 or 3 of them if you want, but they have to be much, much more muted and not drawing as much attention. Remember, contrast makes a big difference where you're putting together your painting. Now let's look at the values. If I squint down on this, I see where's my darkest dark? Well, I'm seeing a dark, dominant dark right here, but that's back pretty far. I like to have, there's a little bit of dark in here. I would like to have this tree just a little darker than that, or this a little bit lighter than that, so that it pushes it back. And I'd like to have the edge of this road possibly, or the dark in this road, maybe be a lot darker so that it moves the eye back. You've got a big dark back here that's the same dark as this dark, and a dark back here that's pretty much the same dark. And so what it's not doing is it's not receding. The other thing that I want to point out here, and this is just something I do all the time, it's a mistake I make all the time, is remember that sharp edges draw the eye. And look, you've got a sharp edge here, a sharp edge here. And the reality is that most time when you see a road, especially a snowy road, it's kind of like this. There's stuff happening. Break up these edges. That will help a lot. Now let's go to the color version. All right. Whoops. Okay. So the color is not super intense on this. Like I said, this is more of a value painting. So let me ask you, what is your intention, Pam from California? Where do you want the eye to go? Because what's happening is that lines tend to direct the eye to a particular area. What's happening here is this road is taking me to right here. And that's where I want to have something that's going to make me feel like, oh, scratch my itch. So what if you were to take this barn, move it into here, not dead center, maybe make the road go a little bit more, put a barn right here, or this house right here, and that might make it a little bit more pleasing. Now the other thing is watch your edges. You got a sharp edge on this house here, not as sharp as this edge here, but there is a sharp edge on the roof line here, and keep things pretty soft. You did a pretty good job of keeping that soft. So that's pretty good. I would ask, I also think there's a perspective issue. So you have to decide where's your vanishing point. And so your vanishing point starts on the horizon line. So let's look at this. So let's say this is your vanishing point, and this is going to impact how you're drawing things, right? And so the edge, this top of this barn needs to be in line with that. That's pretty good. This edge needs to be in line with that. That's pretty close. This edge is way off. And so that makes it look like you can't see the perspective. And on this house in the background, this roof line is out of line. So you're going to have another vanishing point. And so maybe that vanishing point is here, and that's going to impact the roof line on that side. And so you've got to learn your perspective so that you can get these things under control. Now, there's a couple things that I want to point out too, by the way. This, by the way, is a really nice painting. I really like it. Where do you want to draw the eye? White draws the eye. Sharp edges draw the eye. Dark values draw the eye. This white here in the background, this white here is drawing the eye. Okay, one thing you want to do is watch things that are going to draw the eye. This white back in here is drawing the eye. It's not doing you any good. Also, I like to put blues, as things go to the distance, they get a little bluer and less yellow as you go back. And so let's look at this mountain in the background. Let's see if we can start out by, let's try some color in here. Let's get a nice blue color in this one here. Maybe that's a little bit too dark, but maybe that's okay. Now let's bring it just a little bit higher value in here, and maybe let's make that one, since it's so much closer, let's make that one a little bit purpler and get this a little purple in here. And then this one here is probably more closer to green. But sometimes what I'll do is I'll lay down purples or blues. Let's see if I can get a purple in here. Sometimes I'll lay down purples. That's probably a little too purple. Get a little darker purple in here. And then I can, that sense, you see how that creates a sense of distance? So what I can do then is that I can take some greens, depending on the light or the snow or whatever's going on, and I can put some stuff on top of this, and all of a sudden it won't read as purple. Don't look at those little marks. And this dark here, I think, even though it's a gray day and even though it's winter time, I would look for a way to make that a little bit more pleasing. So because it's in the snow, maybe you just look for a way to get this a little bit more purpled up in here. That's what I would probably do. Hide that stuff in there and get a nice dark against that barn so that barn stands up. And then we're going to move this over here. That's the bell. That means I'm done. We're going to have this one over here. And then we're going to take this house and we're going to put this house kind of right in here. And we're going to really draw attention to it and really make that our focal point. You might put a little sunlight on that, little color in there, and then make this your primary. And then I would look for, I'd like to see a big shadow, maybe in the front of all of this, just so you've got a nice shadow here, but maybe you've got shadow, you got reflection, you got shadows going different directions. Maybe just get a big, nice dark shadow up in front, and that way it's kind of making it better to draw the eye towards the back. Get some color in this and get this edge a little looser. Maybe get some more shadow going across here, some shadows in here. And then I would probably look for a way to move this barn a little closer, but I think it's pretty good. Anyway, we won't get into the sky now because we're out of time, but we'll go to the next one. What do we have next? We have a still life, and this is from George. I can't read it. It's kind of fuzzy. In Tennessee. Congratulations, George. This is beautiful. So, George, what a beautiful still life this is. This gets an A+. Beautiful job. I don't know if I can make this any better. Let's see. What would I do with this? Well, first off, let's do composition. All right. So what do we have dead center? We're pretty close. My line is off there a little bit. Let's just go dead center. All right. We have a flower dead center. That's probably okay in this particular case. Rules are meant to be broken, right? And let's look at a grid and thirds and say, okay, what I would probably do is I'd move this vase over to here, and then I'd have the flowers kind of go into here like that. You've really essentially done that. I just shift everything just a little bit further over. And then even in here, you've got these apples. So they're kind of secondary focal points. So that's really nice. I would look at this and I say, there's a couple of things that I love. First off, I love the execution of this. I love the edges. I like the brights. You're really getting attention. And the question then is, what do you want to bring attention to? These flowers or these apples? Because they're both about the same light value. And so that may be okay, but you may want to look for a way to reduce these down here or reduce these up here. I would probably reduce the apples personally. But the other thing that's bugging me is you've got this thing in the background, this sheet, and your edges on this sheet need to be softer a little bit. I would just soften those edges up. So let's look at this. So what if I go into soften it and I just soften this back just a little bit more? And this is tricky because you want it to feel like material, but see how that softening helps? And I would just soften any of these hard edges in here because I think that will help. And I would also look for where do I want to avoid light? I think the thing that would help this painting a little bit more is if I could get, let's assume we've got the composition right. What if we move this whole thing over here a little bit more, right? So we move it over here, and guess what happens when you put this dark against these lights? It just makes it pop, right? And it doesn't really matter if where your shadow is. You could move it across there, and you might even want to have it kind of go across there so that you're really making these things stand out. That all of a sudden, just by doing that, makes the apples less prominent, makes them more dark. So you might think about that. And then of course you would soften the edge. You've also got a thing over here, a shape over here, which is kind of drawing my eye. And I think what I would do is I would just kind of figure out how to soften that up and not make it so sharp. And let's see if we could just make this. I don't really like the shape that I've got here. So let's see if we can figure something else out. I think what I would do is I'd take this color light and I would probably just put it in here, maybe gray it down a little bit. So it's not serving you. And then again, I would probably move this up into here, and then of course you could probably put this as the same value as let's see if I can do this. Put this as the same value as this, and just soften that edge in there. And I think just doing something like that will help a lot. You might also want to consider getting a little darker around those apples. Doesn't have to be completely dark. I would eliminate the light down here because you're drawing the eye and it's not necessarily helping. You could take a little bit of this light out, and I would probably look for a way to strengthen the light that is leading the eye in just a little bit more. So maybe just strengthen that just a little bit more, and maybe look for a way to get just a little tiny bit more light on this thing, just to kind of make it pop just a little bit. And then I wouldn't worry about all this stuff back here. I think this is perfect, just nice soft edges and so on. Let's look at it from a color standpoint. Its color changes at all. Really beautiful warm tone to this, beautiful execution. And I think, if we did what we talked about, I don't think I would pump up the light more on the base. After all, maybe pump up the highlights just a little bit more. But that's probably a little too much, actually. I think it's fine the way it is. But look for a way to, you've got different color on the apples, and so that works nicely. I don't think you need to change those. I like these leaves. I think I would just look for a way to brighten these lilies up just a little touch or whatever they are. And then everything else is beautiful. You've got these nice soft edges in here, but this one here is bugging me. And so I just look for a way to soften that down a little bit because it just feels too sharp. And then if you decide you want to, you can take that fold in the drapery and just put it in a little different place, or else move your flowers so that you're surrounded by a little bit of dark. It doesn't have to be all one shape. And I like the angles. I think the angles are nice, of having that angle leading the eye in. So anyway, we're having fun with this right now. This is really beautiful. Quite frankly, it doesn't need much of anything. It's just so beautiful. Good job on that, George. Okay, what do we have next? We have this beautiful picture. I want to point something out to you. There's a thing that I've never really talked about. They're called psychological lines. Psychological lines are when you have somebody gazing off into the distance, like she is, right? Gazing off into the distance, then that is a psychological line. It's making me wonder what's out there. And I think that's really effective. So congrats on that. Psychological lines can also be like if you've got two people, let's say you got another person right here, and now their eyes are looking at her. So you could have people looking at each other. Those are called psychological lines too. All right, so let's look at her. Black and white first. Compositionally, I think it's really beautiful. I would probably just instinctively, I'd take a little bit more of this out on this edge. You just want a little bit of the bed showing, a little bit of the pillow showing. This and then more on this side. This would kind of make it a little bit more mysterious. That's my thought. It feels a little dead center to me, and I think you could move it off center a little bit. Let's look at the tic-tac-toe grid, and where we have a focal point area here, we have one here. I think, overall it works pretty well because of the fact that this is up higher. But if this were in here a little bit, that might help it just a little bit. But I think it's really lovely. In terms of values, it's harder to create a sense of distance. Values are spot on. Where's your darkest dark? Where's your highest contrast? Your darkest dark is here and here and underneath the foot. But where do you want to draw the most attention? And that's a big question. Maybe it's the hands. If that's the case, this is a good place to put it. If you wanted to draw more attention to her, then maybe you look for a way to darken this area just a little bit more. I think from a execution standpoint, I think it's well done. It looks like it could just use a little bit more emphasis on form. So maybe a little darker on these edges, and then look for ways to enhance that form a little bit. I might pump up this light just a little bit more. Okay, let's look at the color version. Okay, whoops, wrong one. Wow, really lovely, really lovely. Sarah from Virginia, you rock, you're rocking it, baby. I don't know. I think it's pretty strong. Let's just play with something a little bit. Light tends to be warm, and this is a pretty warm painting overall. You can, whites are cool, but what would happen if we really warmed this up and put some variety of warmth and light in here around her? Because we got this big spot, and it's like you can't really tell what she's looking at, and that's kind of nice. But if we could just warm this up a little bit, and then of course when you have a big space like this, you want to put same value in there. You want some perspective, right? So I would probably add some warmth to this. And if you wanted to, you could create the sense of something happening in the distance, but I keep it very faint. Like you could have like the ocean back there, and just real faint, like, oh, I wonder what's going on back there. So it's like, oh, now she's looking at the ocean. Or you could even, if you wanted to, you could put the silhouette of something in there, like, a palm tree. And then, really soften that up. And it's like, oh, look, she's looking at the ocean and a palm tree. But, you don't need that, certainly. I think that what would happen is if you get some of these warm lights in there, now you can put some warm on the whites, right? Now I can't tell. You've got looks like a strong light coming in over here, and you've got a light coming in here. I don't know if I can't tell where the light's coming from. That's confusing me a little bit. But wherever the light's coming from, get some good strong warm light on that, and then find a way to get some strong warm onto her flesh a little bit. Maybe even if you study Dan Gerhardt, who's the master, I love Dan. Maybe he would look for a way to get really nice warm glow. If I can find the right color, you get a really rich warm glow around her hair, and maybe around there, and or around the the edge of her face, and really create a sense of light. So you could do something like that if you wanted to, but looks like the light's coming from here. So just look for a way to pump up this form a little bit. And then you've got I've got some nice subtle color in here. You might look and could you get a little bit more color in there? Not much, but maybe just a little bit more. that's not the right color. But, maybe just a sense of some, again, to create some sense of form with some of this, because it feels like a little turquoise, and that's okay. But down where it's in the darker shadow areas, maybe you make it a little darker, and then you might figure out a way to pump up the light a little bit where the light's hitting it. But that's drawing the eye a lot. I think this is where your focus is. I'm having a hard time with this one. Anyway, good job on that. Okay, what's next? We have a waterfall. Okay. This is from Don Allen in South Africa. Don, thank you for watching and being here, and let's see what we can do. Good job on this. So the question is, what is this painting about? And I think the answer is obviously it's a waterfall. And because you have this big mass, we're going to talk about big masses later. Let's look compositionally at this. First off, we look down the middle, and you have really done a good job of getting that horizon line up higher. So good job on that. Now we'll do this tic-tac-toe board. And man, you are on it. You're on it. You've got something going on in here, and that's right in the focal point. You've got kind of a lead-in line with this, and that's nice. So I think it's really lovely. I would say that, again, ask yourself, where's my darkest dark? And you've got a nice job of leading people back, getting that sense of distance back there. I'm asking myself, what is this here? These trees, their houses, looks like it's a little of both. And that's okay. That's nice mystery. I'd probably soften it up on the edges over here and soften this water, these edges on this water, because it's very rarely hard. Keep it real soft. And there seems to be, there's two tones in here. Well, these are getting lighter as they go back, and that's good. But there's two tones in here. It's dark and light. And I think you need some mid-tone in some of this to create some form. Let's look at the color version of this. Okay, so the colors on this are very, this is, I think it's a watercolor. And the colors on this are really nice. The thing you want to watch for is that the tones in these greens here are almost the same tones in these greens here. And these are closer. So these can be, when they're closer, they can be warmer and they can be more saturated, if you know that term. And you can get some stronger darks up in front. So let's just play that game for just a second. If I look at your strongest dark in here, it's a nice warm dark. Let's get a little bit more of this dark in here and a little bit more, it's darks and warms. I just pump up the darks in here, and this is going to help you create distance. This, by the way, is acting like an arrow, and that's good if this is where you're trying to draw people. So just wanted to point that out, but get some good strong darks. I know it's harder with watercolor, but get some darks in here. The other thing I would be careful about are edges, right? You've got a lot of sharp edges all the way along here, and I think you need a little variety in there. So I would consider going here and just soften some things out a little bit where you don't want to draw the eye, and just soften that up. Soften up some of these edges of this waterfall. And I think, those rocks may have been black. They look a little black, but typically if you look at rocks, wet rocks, they're a little black, but they also have a little bit of brown or blue in them. And so you might look for ways to get a little sense of some mid-tones. Well, first off, some gray blues are nice. If you could get some mid-tones in here, and so that not everything is just pure white, because pure white is really hard on the eye. And I would look for ways. I'd probably make this more mid-tone outside of the focal point area, and maybe more mid-tone down in here, a little less mid-tone so it's going in the back, so that you're focusing everybody kind of on this area. And then, if I were painting this in oils, which you're not, I'd look for a way I can pump up the warmth of the light, and I'd probably really pump up the light in a couple of areas right in here, because I really want to draw attention in here. And then, of course, everything is about softness in waterfalls. You want to look for, you can have hard edges, but you also want to have some good soft edges. So I don't know that helps, but if you had this in light in here, and then you had everything else kind of in shadow over, whoa, that's dangerous. Had everything else kind of in shadow over here and over here. So it's light, but it's not quite as bright. Then, it's like, oh, the light happens to be coming down and hitting. And then you could even play that game up a little bit more and pump up a little bit of light right in here in your focal point. And maybe if that's a roof line, maybe you've got a nice bright roof line in here. A couple of things so your eye goes, wow, the sun is really kissing that particular spot right there. Anyway, I think it's a lovely painting. Congratulations, and thanks for tuning in from South Africa. Okay, what's next? Ooh, okay, we have a little farm scene. Well, it's a schoolhouse, actually. This is from 𝗙𝗵𝗶𝗱𝗆 in California. Congratulations, Terry. Thank you for your bravery. Okay, so there are a couple of things that I noticed right away. This to me feels like it was painted from a photograph, and it probably was, and that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. But when there are photographs, the clues that I'm getting on photographs is that photographs darken the shadows. So this shadow area in here feels a little too dark to me, and these darks feel a little too dark to me. So, and as do kind of these darks. And so I'd be really careful about that. Photographs tend to enhance the darks. But I like this nice foreground shadow. You've been listening and paying attention. Thank you. That's nice. I would probably just extend that shadow over, just, so that it just fills in this whole area here. Let's look at composition. Dead center, nothing. That's beautiful. Good. Congratulations. Nice horizon line down here, lower. That's good. And let's look at our tic-tac-toe grid. So roughly here and here. So you've got to ask yourself, what's my focal point? Right here, you've got this house kind of right in your focal point, and that's good. And then you've got these people here pretty close to your focal point. And so I think that's really good. I think it's serving you well. You've also done a really nice job of making this muted background in here, so you're not trying to fight that. Let's look at the color and see what the color is happening. Drink water. All right. So I think the thing that I would work on, other than what I talked about, you've got a nice dark shadow in the front. I would lighten it up a little bit, but I'd leave part of it dark, right? So I would probably, that's too light. Probably look for a way to get some blue tones in here. And excuse me. And if you want to point to something, you can use a shadow to point to something, right? You can just do something like that and get it dark in this corner over here, a little lighter. And remember, on cast shadows, depending on how close it is to the subject, it's going to be softer or harder. So keep that in mind. So you could kind of soften up the edges of the shadows. When I do shadows, I try to have see if I can do this. I try to have the shadow area, and then I take a tone that's just a little bit lower, and maybe even one that's a little lower than that. And so the shadow is kind of like 2 tones or 3 tones. And then, when you soften that, it just feels more like a shadow, reading more like a shadow. See that? Okay, so the thing that I'm noticing is that everything is very sharp, everything's in focus. And so I think what we want to do, this is really these people out here, I think that's what the painting is really all about. They're out there having fun. And this is a neat thing because it's in the schoolhouse, but I've got this big mass here, and it's got sharp lines, and it's really drawing my eye away from this. So you've got to decide which is my focal point. And so if I wanted to make this my focal point, then I would probably look for a way. First off, I would say, could I put this farmhouse in some more shadow? Could I make that shadow a little bit bigger, like, it's really late afternoon sunlight? Or could I put the whole thing in more shadow? You've got a lot of nice shadow on here, but can you look for a way, or can you put some variation in this value in here? So could we do a little variation in color in the lights? I would also look for, can we break up these edges along this sharp edge? Because what we're trying to do is we want it to be there, but we don't want it to stand out too much. And so you've got, maybe darken some of this on here. It probably needed to be a little darker anyway. Remember, there are three types of planes. There's a horizontal plane, there's a vertical plane, and there's an angled plane, like a mountain. So this gets the most light, this gets the least light, this gets middle light, right? So anyway, what I'm trying to do here is to make this kind of more stand out a little bit less. So I'd probably get in here, darken the shadow over here a little bit more, darken this, and just make this less about the church or the building. And then, maybe you throw a spot of light on it, to really make it stand out in a couple of places, but not too much. This thing back here, it's there. It doesn't serve any purpose. So I would either take it out or I would soften the edges. And this fence, is it necessary? I guess it's there. Doesn't hurt. But let's see what happens if we just soften this up back here. Like, it doesn't really serve much purpose. I think you could almost take this same color of this tree, give this an outline, darker outline for that kid, and then you soften that up, and that's just like, maybe you don't need all that, and then you take this color in here and you continue that on back there. So what I'm looking for are, you've got a lot of darks, and I would say this dark is too dark for where it is. If it were far forward, I would soften this tree up, and I would lighten it up, soften up everything a little bit, and get your light more yellow, right? So you've got nice yellow in your light back in here, pretty much. I might look for a way to get a really strong light in here coming across, and that way you can throw some of that strong light on the edge of their clothes, their hats, so that it really gives them, a strong outline, and that will enhance it. I would also look for a way, there's a thing that you got to be careful about. You got 2 and you got 2. And now this is a 5th, and that's good. You want to have odd numbers, but look for a way. Could you group things a little differently? What's happening with these figures? You got one here, and then you got one here, you got one here, and then you got one here. So these patterns here and here, here and here are very similar. So what could you do? You could group this. So I would probably not put her in a black dress. I'd make it a little less dark, but I'd maybe put her here and put her hat on her here. And then I would look for a way to just erase this here. And now you've got a little different grouping. And so we could just make that, you can still tell what it is, but I would look for ways to overlap figures. I think that's good. This figure here, you don't want to draw too much attention to her. She's there, but that way you can tell it's there. But I would also maybe, look for a way to drop a spot of light on her. And then, you've got this big mass of color up here, and that's drawing the eye. I would look for a way, your grass looks a little chalky. So this means it's got a little light in it. When you put too much light in something like a green, it's chalky. So if you add some yellow into it, or you lighten it with yellow, it helps. And then you want to get the chroma out. The chroma looks really nice in this, meaning it's not too chromatic. And so that's good. And then just look for some spots of light. You know, you put some light on this tree. I would probably darken most of this up here because, you know, it's not adding a lot. And you want to have, you do have light up there, and you could have a really strong light in here kind of on the edge of this tree so that you get a little bit of that. But it just, and then I'd probably mute back. See if we can get that. Well, not finding it. Anyway, I'd probably find a color in here and mute some of this back in here, because now there's one thing you want to watch for also is corners, right? So there are a lot of people who believe, and I think this is not always true, you want to have a dark corner and a light corner, a dark corner and a light corner. And that's one thing this artist has done really well, is that there is variety in the corners: light, dark, light, dark. And so I think that's pretty good. And so overall, I think, you know, we've got some interesting things to play with here. And I think we just soften up this house, break up some of these edges a little bit, maybe bring some of these trees over this to just break it up. I like to break up big spaces because I think that matters. And then, you know, your shadow, you pump up your light. I know I'm done. You pump up your light in here a little bit more around these figures to draw some attention to them. And right in your focal point area, but don't put that everywhere, and that's just going to help. Okay, what do we have next? Good job on that, by the way. Okay, we have asparagus. Well, this is beautiful. Let's see what we can do with it. See if we can do anything with it. The question I have is, where do you want to draw the eye? Well, you don't really have much choice here. I mean, your eye is going to go here no matter what because of that. You've got this line. It's kind of leading me in this direction, and that kind of leads me up to there. So that works pretty well. Compositionally, I think overall, you know, it's pretty strong. We got this edge right in the middle. I might move that off over to the side a little bit. Compositionally, tic-tac-toe board wise, you got your primary composition in here. I think that's good. So let's look at the color version. You know, you got a good solid dark in the back that's making these asparagus pop out. To me, you know, what I talked about was chalky. Good job on this, by the way. This is from Jonathan Pierce in North Carolina. Congratulations, Jonathan. I think what's happening here is it feels cool when it should feel warm. So what does that mean? So you've got some real cool greens on here. And maybe what I'd like to do is just to warm that up just a little bit more. Try to get a little bit more. Let's see if I can figure out how to do this with this iPad. Get a little bit. Let's see if we can do this. See a little. That's too cool. This is tricky, isn't it? I would look for a way to pump up the color on these just a little bit in your focal point. I wouldn't do it everywhere. Maybe a touch of that color down here, and then I would try to create a little bit of form. Get some midtones in here, and get some good darks on the edges, so it creates a sense of roundness right in that. And this all here feels a little bit busy to me, and I don't know why, but I guess it's just because of all the little movements. And so I might look for a way to soften some of this, soften these edges of these ones in the back. And then what about the light? Well, I think you could make this really interesting by pumping up the light on this, right? So what I might do, I'm going to just try it. I don't know if I'm going to like it. Is I'm just going to really pump up the light. See what happens. I don't know if I'm going to like it. This is an experiment. That's probably a bit much, but if if you were to pump that up, maybe not quite so intensely, but pump it up a little bit, and then not put it everywhere, but soften it up. And it feels like, you can have some sense of some light is coming in a couple of places. And that just pump up the warmth of that light in a couple of places. I think that might help it. But quite frankly, you don't want to draw too much attention over here. So maybe we'd be better off to put that in shadow a little bit. And so, you have to experiment. Everything's an experiment. So maybe part of this, maybe you've got like a shadow coming across, like there's a window or something in there. So you can create a direction line that is pushing me in there. And then maybe you could take that same color and, you've got something like this happening. And then you can kind of gray it out in the distance or something so you're creating this sense of distance with, variations in color. That's probably a little crazy, but I think the idea is that you want to try to create a sense of light. I would do the same thing on the table. Is I would look for a color that feels like the table is catching a little bit of light, and I would try to do it closer to where I want the eye to go. So maybe just a little bit on the table, and then I'd look for ways to darken this table, get it in some shade. Maybe don't put the whole thing in light. And I know you've got these pastel sticks down there, the pieces of asparagus. I'm not so sure they're lending anything. They might be. You've got a strong light in this water. I don't know how to get maybe we get a little bit of color, that sense of color in there, and then you can get some sense of color on this jar, some light blues on this jar to kind of just help it feel a little jar-like. I would look for a way to kind of mute this back in here and definitely mute this. And then, because what you really want it to be about is this. And yet I'm not so sure I was helpful on that, but I think the strong darks in the background are really good. So good job on this. All right, do we have any more? We have no more. Okay, so let's talk about composition. So there's a concept called visual weight. And so what visual weight is let's say you've got a picture, let's do a vertical, and let's do a horizontal too. Okay. Got a horizontal, and let's say you've got a little sailboat here, and it's got let's actually make this a little bigger sailboat. It's got a really big sail on it. It's compositional weight. It's virtual weight, visual weight. So you're trying to dominate the picture with one piece of something. So here's another example: is you've got a tree, right? And so this is all about that tree. You've got the visual weight of that. Or if you look at an Edgar Payne composition, or if you look at what Jim Woodard does a lot, you'll have these big mountains with a little canyon, a lead in line, a couple of guys on horses in here, and this is dominating the composition. So let me show you a couple of examples of virtual weight. This one, I thought, this is really lovely. Deborah Hughes posted this the other day from an art show about women artists in California. And I love the visual weight of this because this is really dominating. This umbrella area is just dominating, and then the figure is pretty big. The temptation might be to make the figure small, put the umbrella in, and then put all the background in. So I think that's really lovely. Here's another great example of one. This is Edgar Payne. This one's out of focus, but see the visual weight of this? Right? So got a big visual weight. It's taken up almost everything. It's one big mass. And mass is wonderful. So here is another Edgar Payne. This is something you would see Woodard do too. Big mass, taking up the majority of it, low horizon line, couple little cowboys. And then let's look at, here's another version. This is another 𝗙𝗲𝗄𝗃. So same thing, big mass, right? Big mass, two big shapes, little cowboys. Now that's the other thing I want to point out to you while we've got this, is the sense of scale. If you have something big and you put something small in it, it gives it a sense of scale. See, you got small cowboys, and then you've got a big space. And if these cowboys were this big here, these mountains feel smaller. See how that works? Okay, and I think I've got a couple more. This one is T. Allen Lawson. It's a big mass, right? This house is one big mass. Now here's another one. This is T. Allen Lawson. I mean, that's a total mass, right? Takes up the whole thing. And then here's another T. Allen Lawson, where you've got something is a big mass here. Big mass taking up the majority of the painting. So keep that in mind. Okay, let's end this thing. I just want to tell you guys, we got an event coming up, the brand new event, and it's called Art Marketing Mastery Day and our Art Business Mastery Day. And the whole concept here is that you can learn how to get your 2025 under control. So it's January 10th. We're going to do some planning. We're going to teach you a lot of principles in art marketing. And it's only like $47. So you can do that. We also have Watercolor Live is coming up in January at watercolorlive.com. I hope this has been helpful. Thank you for tuning in today. Have a terrific day.